Many people turn to the likes of Jordan Peterson or Andrew Tate to try and figure out what it is to be a man. And I'm half kidding, obviously. Many people aren't so much looking for what it means to be a man. They're looking for people who speak truth about masculinity. And Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson are two sides of the same coin in that respect. That being said, Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate both have their share of controversial statements. But I started thinking when I saw this tweet posted by Carl Benjamin. It's actually a tweet posted by Babe Brahmin, which was reposted by Carl Benjamin. I started thinking about what it means to be a man, what it means to actually be a man. What are your priorities? What is fear and what is bravery? I give you, my friends, the story of Andre the Rooster. Ah, yes. I don't know if this is the first completely dedicated segment to chickens, but this story is actually about the worth of men and what it means to be a man. Are you a man? And what does that mean? Well, there's a men and there to boys. And they have that saying about this one really separates men from the boys here, right? But what does that mean? I look to the modern world today and I see so much Sodom and Gomorrah. And take it for what it is. Maybe you like the idea of the U.S. being Sodom and Gomorrah. Weak men partying, women partying, drugs, abuse, vanity, lust, you name it. All the 7 deadly sins. And we look for stories of inspiration. There's a story of Hachiko the dog. Do you know the story of Hachiko? Hachiko was an Akita who went with his owner, a Japanese professor, every day to the train station to see him off. And then every day he would meet back at the train station to wait for his owner to get off the train and they'd walk home together. One day, the professor had a stroke while teaching at university. And Hachiko the dog stood by that train and waiting, but he never came back. So what happened? For 10 years, until his death, Hachiko waited at the train station for 10 years, and everyone knew him. They saw him, this stray who was always there, who refused to give up on his friend. It was such an amazing thing to the people in Japan that they built a statue in his honor. Now, the story's a bit more complicated than that. They tried to rehome Hachiko. He'd always run away and come back to the train station. But he represents loyalty, pure loyalty. And that's something about being a good person. But understanding what it is to be a man. I now give you the story of Andre the Rooster. Brahmin Babe says, our fearless rooster Andre was killed in the line of duty this week. He fought off a raccoon long enough for us to intervene, but he didn't make it. Not a single chicken was lost. He was their protector, a hero. He will be sorely missed. My heart is heavy. Rip, sweet prince. And you know what? There's something amazing in that story, but the story's wrong. A chicken was lost that day, and that was Andre. He gave himself to make sure his family survived. I often hear when I say this, people saying he wasn't a chicken, he was a rooster. No. He was a chicken. He wasn't a hen. Okay? There's roosters and there's hens. All right? They're all chickens. Andre, Brahmin Babe says, was fearless. And I want to make sure I'm clear. I have tremendous respect for Brahmin Babe and for her rooster, but I must disagree, as you can see in my tweet. Andre wasn't fearless. It wasn't a lack of fear that led him charging full speed into the face of a raccoon that sought his death and to kill his family. Quite the opposite. Andre was scared. He was scared for his life. But to him, the lives of his family were more important than his own. He feared losing their lives more than he feared losing his. And that made me think, what does it mean to be a man? When I saw this, and I've made this point before, when I saw this, I said, there are chickens who have more courage than some humans. You know, we've had chickens for quite some while. We have Chicken City, chickencity.com. We love our chickens. They're silly little doofy things. Rest in peace, Roberto Jr. He had a heart attack and died suddenly. I remember we had, when we only had, I think, 7 chickens. And accidentally a rooster. Yeah, we didn't intend to have a rooster, but turns out one of the baby chicks we bought supposed to be a girl and turned out to be a dude. That's Roberto. There was a hawk attack. A hawk struck down at our chicken coop because the way we had it set up was The whole chicken coop was caged off in every direction, and there was a little door we could open to let them out into our garden area to do their chicken business because they fertilize the soil and they eat bugs and they destroy your crops if you don't take care of it properly. But we didn't mind. We let the chickens out saying, go for it. And for the most part, it was fine. But we typically didn't leave them out until we got what we wanted and let them have the rest. Hawk struck, and we have on camera, Roberto runs to the door and then stops and stands outside it as all the hens run inside, and then he goes in last. It's stories like that get me reading about roosters and the purpose of having them. When we realized that we had a rooster, I decided to look into it. And they said, you want a rooster? You do. I mean, some people get a couple hens just to have them lay eggs, but it's good to have the dude around. And you can actually have multiple. We have several roosters. They don't fight each other. That's a misconception. The story goes, roosters will sacrifice themselves to save their families. And that's why I've often said on Timcast IRL, I take issue with people saying that, using the word chicken synonymously with coward. Because while hens may run in fear, certainly I think it's practical. They're not going to fight, but they'll fight if they have to, but they'll run. But all animals will. Humans will. Humans will shove people out of the way to get on the lifeboats in the Titanic. Roosters will run full speed towards the predator knowing they will die to save their families. It's really amazing. So what does it mean to be a man? Well, I thought about this. And I thought about in my life and in most people's lives, what does it mean to have no fear? Completely wrong. Completely wrong. Do you think the men who stormed the beaches of Normandy had no fear? I'm sure that they were praying. Forlorn hope, what do they call it? Knowing you're the first person out in the front line, your chance of survival is nothing. You're the center. You're the first line of defense. Man, imagine old battlefields during the Revolution. Imagine being one of the, in the Continental Army to defend the birth of a new nation. And they say, you will stand in front. And you did. You know your chance of survival is low, but there's a reason why you do it. And Andre got me thinking about what it means to truly fear. Andre was terrified. And I think most men who've encountered serious catastrophes or crises knows this. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is facing down your fear, but acting anyway because you know you have to. So what does it mean to fear? Andre, I know it's a bit silly to use the story of a rooster, but, in his memory, Andre fears something greater than death. And I think most men who have families will understand this fear. And so I ask you, what do you fear more? Death? Or standing over the dead bodies of your children? And so when I look at a story about Andre the rooster, I don't know what a rooster's thinking. I don't know that he actually thinks anything close to what I'm saying, but he represents something. There is something much worse than death. I tweeted out a scene from the movie The Patriot. In this scene, they come across a home that's been burnt to the ground by the British. They call them British by the crown, by the regulars. Depending on at the time, everybody was technically subject of the crown, but they were resisting, depending on who you ask. They come across this burned down home, and a man jumps off his horse and runs over to find his wife and son murdered. And he paces back and forth, looks at the other men, begins crying, puts his flintlock to his head, and ends his own life. This man was willing to fight and die for the birth of a new nation. I know it's a story, but I love what it represents. He was willing to fight and die. Why? Because it would make a better and safer life for his family. It was what must be done. The threat to them was great. Same thing is true of Mel Gibson's character in The Patriot. He didn't want to be involved at all. Watch that movie. I love that movie. It's my favorite movie. And then you had the fictional comic book villain of a British officer who kills Mel Gibson's kid. And that basically drives the rage in his character to then go to war and engage in some very serious tactics, some guerrilla warfare. It's particularly brutal. And so when I see that scene where the dude ends his life, I thought to myself, you can't do that, man. You can't. We need you. They took his kid from him and the pain was too great to bear. But this means he let them do it. He needed to stand and fight, not for his children, but for everyone else's as well. But that scene is what I thought of when I heard this story of Andre the rooster. And we laugh because it's a silly little animal. But their lives to them, they matter. These roosters care about their families. And Andre knew he cared about his family enough to sacrifice himself. The fear is real. But it's not a question of being fearless. It's a question of what do you fear more? And I think for most people, again, I don't know about roosters, but that's the point I'm kind of making. Most men have a greater fear than death. When they're running full speed to fight off a predator, to fight off a burglar in their home, knowing they could die, there's something greater than death they fear, and that's what would happen to their family. And I saw a lot of people respond and say, I don't fear death, I fear being the last one left. And I was like, that's a good way to put it. The pain you would experience from standing over the dead bodies of your loved ones is substantially greater than the death of dying. So it makes me think about what it means to be a man. And this is not to diminish the women's capabilities of self-sacrifice or to say that they don't. It's that men and women have, in generalities, it's bimodal. Women are the nurturers who protect and nourish on the short term, and men are the ones who take the more extreme actions of defense of their family consistently. The men will go out, they'll hunt, they'll provide, they'll protect, they'll stand guard over the village and the tribe, and the women will take care of creating humans and nurturing them to be good people. Fathers do too, don't get me wrong, I know. And I think, we see these stories about, we've talked about it. What happens when someone grows up without a dad? You have high crime rates, drug abuse. And we don't ever ask ourselves, we should, what happens when people grow up without mothers? Because typically we think it's fine so long as they're not committing crimes. But I think there's a balance in this. So anyway, without further ado, I give you this short video discussing what it means to be a man and what it means to be scared. When men run into the burning building, and women do this too, but it is overwhelmingly men. When men rush in full speed to a hail of gunfire, be it those men who stormed into that school knowing there was a shooter at that church. When these men are running into danger, you think they're not scared? Of course they're scared. But they believe, one, they can do it, they can survive. And more importantly, these officers who rushed in full speed to stop this mass shooter feared something greater. That was the children being killed. And so you will throw yourselves full speed. We take a look at some of these other stories where the officers ran. You take a look at Uvalde, where they stood outside terrified. That's not what it is to be a man. And that's not what we want to cultivate in our young men. But it seems to be taking over a bit too much. No longer are the days of men who are willing to run full speed, risking their lives to save their families. Too many people say things like, I don't want to put my family at risk, which is an understandable statement. But just understand, when you refuse to speak up, when you refuse to defend your community, you are condemning your children to live in the pod and eat the bugs. And maybe you say to yourself, that's better than being dead. Understood? Understood. But I look at the men in Uvalde, not the police, the people who ran in to save their kids. I look at our system of governance, and we are overwhelmed by people who don't have the conviction of a single rooster. Call them chicken. That's an insult to chickens. So I don't know. There's a lot more to it than that, but I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up. I don't know when I'm posting this. Probably Friday or whatever. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.